How many goblins could a goblin gob if a goblin could gob goblins?
Hey gang! Using the promo code MTGMudsta, all caps, will get you 10% off any order over $10 at Flipside Gaming. It'll also get you 10% off any orders of singles at Multizone. And it'll get you 10% off most products at Original Magic Art, with the exceptions of some paintings. If these fine sites don't have what you're looking for, you can also consider using my affiliate link when ordering from TCG Player. And if you'd like to join the generic Goblin Gang to support this channel, there's a link to my Patreon in the description below. Just a heads up, but Flipside Gaming is going to be giving away a Zendikar Rising set booster box. The contest will run from August 31st all the way to September 25th, 2020. The typical rules apply of one entry per household. You'll be entered for your chance to win when you use my promo code on an order of $10 or more, or if you send Flipside Gaming a stamped, self-addressed envelope or postcard to the address found above. So good luck and have fun. Today's game is another Jersey Boy special, with Trevor playing Freyalise. He keeps Heritage Druid, 2 Forests, Dragon Warcaller, Pier's Whim, and a Skull Clamp. Matt is playing Scion on the Ur-Dragon, keeping Dragon Tempest, Croson Grip, Wooded Foothills, Sacred Foundry, a Mountain, a Forest, and an Island. Mike has got his Ghave deck, keeping Godless Shrine, Tainted Field, Swamp, Cultivate, Kadama's Reach, Blasting Station, and Zulapur Cutthroat. Sean is playing Yuriko Ninjas, keeping Underground River, Underground Sea, Throat Slitter, Throat Seeker, Bitter Blossom, and 2 islands. Trevor wins the die roll and starts us off. Trevor plays a forest, tapping it to cast Heritage Druid. Matt plays a Misty Rainforest, passing as he loses 1 and sacrifices it to go and find a land. Sean plays an Altered Underground Sea. Mike plays a tapped Godless Shrine, passing back to Trevor. Trevor plays a forest and casts Dragon Warcaller. He then casts the Skull Clamp and hits Mike for 1 with the Heritage Druid. At this point, Matt has found a Steam Vents, and he moves to his turn, playing and then sacrificing the Wooded Foothills and passing while searching. Sean plays an Underground River and pays 2 mana for Bitter Blossom. Mike continues to play tapped Shocklands, dropping an Overgrown Tomb. Trevor draws and plays a forest. He casts Wood Elves and goes to find a forest that comes in untapped, passing. Matt continues his trend of fetch lands, playing out Flooded Strand, and sacrifices it, losing 1 to go and find another land while passing and searching. Sean loses 1 on his upkeep, gaining a fairy token from the Bitter Blossom, and he plays an island. He casts a Throat Seeker, one of the new ninjas from Modern Horizons, and passes. Mike plays a forest and casts Kadama's Reach. He passes while finding a basic for the field and 1 for his hand. Trevor plays a forest and has enough mana for Freyalise. He upticks her to make an Elf Druid token, and then uses the Heritage Druid's ability to tap 3 other elves to make 3 green mana. 2 of that mana gets him a Sylvan Library, while the final mana gets used to equip the Wood Elves with the Skull Clamp. It dies, and Trevor then draws 2, passing. Matt draws and doesn't play a fetch land finally. He does play a tap Sacred Foundry, and pays 2 mana to cast a Dragon Tempest. Sean loses another life and gets a fairy token. He plays an island for turn, and turns things sideways as he sends the Throat Seeker at Freyalise and the fairy token at Mike. Neither opponent can block, and before damage, Sean Commander Ninjutsus in Yuriko, bouncing the fairy token back to hand. Combat damage is then dealt, with Freyalise taking 3, while Mike takes 1, and Sean gains 4 life. He then reveals for the Yuriko trigger, and everyone takes 2 from the Thought Vessel. Sean had previously planned on casting Key to the City in his post-combat main phase, but instead decides to drop the Thought Vessel before passing. Mike plays a Tainted Field and continues the train to Rampville. He plays Cultivate, going to find another basic for the field, and 1 for his hand, and passes while searching to save some time. During Trevor's draw step, he gets to look at his top 2 extra cards using his Sylvan Library ability, and he decides to take 4 damage to keep an extra card. He then upticks Freyalise again, making another Elf Druid token, and then plays a forest and casts Pier's Whim. In a strange move for Trevor, he has Mike be a friend, names himself as a friend, and names Sean and Matt as foes. Matt and Scion sacrifice an enchantment or an artifact, while he and Mike go and find a land. Trevor grabs a tapped Gaia's Cradle, while Mike finds a tapped command tower. Trevor then clamps the new Druid token, drawing 2 more, and goes to combat. He then hits Matt for 3, and passes. Matt's turn is very quick as he casts Chromatic Lantern after drawing it, and passes to Scion. Scion loses another 1 to the Bitter Blossom, and gets another token. He plays a Swamp for turn, and swings everything he can at Trevor. Trevor can't block, and before damage, Scion ninjutsus in the Throat Slitter for one of his Fairy Rogues. Trevor then takes 6, while Scion gains 6, and Scion has some triggers to resolve from Yuriko, with the first one revealing Dark Petition, dealing 5 to his opponents. The second is an island, doing 0, and the third is Tetsuko, dealing another 2 to his opponents. Scion then sadly misses his Throat Slitter trigger, and he plays out Tetsuko in his second main phase, passing. Mike plays a Forest for turn, and brings out Ghave in his main phase. He then casts one of his favorite token makers, Emrakul's Evangel, and he passes to Trevor. Trevor has his library trigger to resolve, looking at his extra cards. He takes another 4 life loss, keeping an extra card, and then plays a Force in his main phase. He upticks Freyalise once more to make an Elf Druid, and then plays out Reclamation Sage. It enters, blowing up Scion's Bitter Blossom. Trevor then has an Oracle of Moldiah joining the party, and reveals his top card, a Soul of the Harvest. The Cradle is then tapped for 5 green, and Trevor uses Song of the Dryads on Yuriko to do her best impression of Kawarimi no Jitsu. Trevor then plays out Findhorn Elves, and Matt responds to that using Croson Grips to take out the Skull Clamp. Trevor then goes to combat, hitting Matt for 2. Matt plays an island for turn, and brings out Scion of the Ur-Dragon in his main phase, passing with nothing else to do. Scion untaps and plays an island. Diabolic Tutor is then cast and lets him go and find a card for his hand, and he then plays out Key to the City. He activates the key, discarding a card to make Throat Slitter unblockable, and goes at Trevor. He connects for 2, and gets to destroy a non-black creature, picking off the Oracle. Scion then passes. Mike untaps and plays a Swamp, casting Zulaport Cutthroat. Mike then uses Ghave's ability to remove a +1/+1 counter, removing all of the counters from Ghave and sending his commander back to the command zone and gaining 5 Saproling tokens. Mike then taps the Evangel, sacrificing itself and 5 Saproling tokens to make 6 3/2 Eldrazi tokens. With the tokens of the Evangel dying, Mike also gets 6 triggers from the Zulaport Cutthroat, draining his opponents for 6 and gaining 6. Mike then passes. Trevor once more uses his library trigger, but doesn't keep any extras. He plays a Mutavault, and then downticks Freyalise to use her ultimate, drawing cards equal to the number of creatures he has. Trevor then casts an Emerald Medallion, and then pays 2 mana for Growing Rites of Itlamok. He reveals Marwyn from his top 4, and puts her to hand. Trevor then casts the Elf, and taps his Cradle for more mana. He wants to draw even more cards at this point, putting his stack a Shamanic Revelation, and drawing another chunk of cards. He then casts Llanowar Elves and Sol Ring. As the Llanowar Elves enter, Marwyn gets a counter, and Trevor passes, transforming their rights into Itlamok, Cradle of the Sun. Matt plays a Mountain, and casts Lightning Greaves. He has his commander gain some booties, and activates Sion's ability. He goes into his library to find a dragon, and put it into his graveyard, and we see the Ur-Dragon hitting the bin. Trevor and Matt then make a deal to not attack each other for the next turn, and Matt heads to combat, swinging his commander at Scion. He gets an Ur-Dragon trigger, drawing a card, and then gets to put out a permanent from his hand. It's a Hellkite Charger, and Scion blocks the Ur-Dragon with a fairy token. Matt then casts a Felwar Stone, and passes. Scion untaps and draws for turn, playing a Swamp. He uses Scour from Existence on the Scion of the Dryad, with Yuriko dramatically returning to the field from a tree. He discards another card to activate the key, making the Throat Slitter unblockable once more. He swings it and Yuriko at Matt, who can't block. Before damage is dealt, Trevor taps his Itlamok, and is able to cast Kindred Summons, naming elves and counting up how many he has. He gets to reveal from his library until he hits 7 elves, and here we go. He hits Caller of the Claw, Beast Whisperer, Elvish Reclaimer, Arbor Elf, Quirion Ranger, Farhaven Elf, and then Elvish Champion. Matt then takes 3, and Scion gains 3 because of the Throat Seeker, and he gets 2 Yuriko triggers. The first card is Cabal Coffers, which does 0, and the second is Walker of Secret Ways, which has his opponents losing 3 life from the trigger. Scion then passes to Mike. Mike untaps, and can't seem to draw anything except for ramp this game, casting Explosive Vegetation. He goes to find 2 tap basics, and plays a tap Temple of Plenty. He scries 1, and keeps it there. Mike then casts Eternal Witness, returning to hand Explosive Vegetation, and passes to Trevor. Trevor untaps his elf army, and uses the library trigger, but doesn't keep any extras. He cycles Tranquil Thicket in his main phase, drawing another card, and plays Deserted Temple for turn. He casts Crater of Behemoth in his main phase, and it pumps his board to be enormous. He swings only at Scion and Mike, upholding his deal with Matt, and takes his 2 opponents out. With nothing else, Trevor has to pass. Matt plays a Shockland, taking 2 to have it come in untapped. He then activates Scion, going into his library, and banning his copy of Savage Ventmaw. Between the copy of the Ventmaw and the Hellkite Charger, Matt will be able to gain several combat steps this turn, which is enough to take Trevor out due to his creatures having no reach. Game review time. So first off, good on Trevor for upholding his end of the bargain, and not attacking Matt and killing him, even though he definitely could have with that Crater of Behemoth turn. I think Matt was going to win either way, because let's face it, the Savage Ventmaw and Hellkite Charger combo is pretty nasty. Matt would have been able to have a bunch of extra combat steps that turn, and probably been able to take out most of his opponents through combat damage with his commander at the very least. Unfortunately for Mike, he seemed to be only able to ramp this game, and while he had a ton of mana, he just didn't have anything to do with it. Scion seemed to get a lot of good hits in, and he was getting a ton of life with that Throat Seeker. I really liked the card, and I think Yuriko is just a really great Dimir commander deck. Please be sure to tune in every Monday and Thursday at 11 AM Eastern Standard Time for a guaranteed new video. You can also follow me on Twitter at MTGMudsta. You can find me on Facebook at facebook.com/MTGMudsta. And lastly, you can check me out when I stream at twitch.tv/MTGMudsta. This video is brought to you in support by my patrons. If you're looking for a way to help out the channel, please be sure to visit the link below. Thank you all for watching this video, and don't forget, friends are just opponents you haven't eliminated yet.